Hello everyone, this is Fantastic Worlds, welcoming you back to Lovecraft Country in the Secret World Interludes, and today we're going to be doing the next part of Transylvania. Transylvania is going to take us a while. It's 3 large areas, each with their own separate zones. We'll be doing the next zone. Now, before we start doing this, you have to keep in mind that Transylvania, due to Bram Stoker's setting Dracula in it, has a dual reputation in fiction. Well, actually has a fictional background and it has a real-world background. The fictional background we've gone over here with, of course, Vlad Tepes being transformed into Dracula by Bram Stoker, and the first and last parts of the story taking place in Transylvania, or at least Transylvania as a British man who only read about it in the museum library thought it would look like. And then we have the real world Transylvania, which as part of Romania was absorbed into the Eastern Bloc by the Soviet Union post-World War II to fall of the Berlin Wall in 1990. It still's got its own issues at the moment with freedom and dictatorship, but we're going to be dealing with the past at this point. Now, the game itself cues off both this dual background with the, of course, Empire army being drawn from Stoker's imagination, and the rest of it kind of being deal with the real world. And the first thing we're going to be dealing with is the effect of the Soviet Union to this area. You're going to notice the moment you step out of the village, these soulless blocks. I mean, even for architecture that's cookie cutter, this is soulless. Gray concrete. The interior is being ruined, lowest quality, of course, and that is because these were created by the Soviet Union during their, shall we say, modernization of Romania post-World War II. You have to remember something, that before World War II happened, there was no concept of international trade or standardization of technology, areas being economically developed. So a lot of the places that World War II fought over that weren't major industrial areas were pretty much just rural villages. So what happens is post-World War II, both sides, the West and the Soviet Union, tried to advance it. Now, the Soviet Union had less resources and also gave less of a shit. So when it created stuff, it did it on the cheap. Now, these were created by what is called central planning in communism. That means that essentially some bureaucrat somewhere in Moscow says, I want 100 buildings done in 5 years, and if you don't do it, I'm going to start executing people. So they made these buildings by slapping them up and, of course, watching them fall down. As you can see how quickly they've crumbled into ruins compared to the older structures of the village, which were being maintained and lived in. It's primarily one of the biggest differences you're going to see between, shall we say, the rural sections and the urban sections here. Now, of course, when the Soviet Union rolled out of here, nobody really wanted to live in these places anymore if they didn't have to, so they got abandoned. Some of the structures still remain, like the dumpsters and such. They probably left because to rust out in the open, as well as the old cars. And everything that they wanted, they just took back into the village. Now, you notice I'm driving the hover board today, the one with the stealth field, because we're at this point forward, whenever we're doing interludes, I cannot stop aggroing people. So let's pop in and take a look around. There we go. Yeah. As you can see, of course, these ruins are pretty torn up. Now, what would have happened is that you notice that some of these structures have damaged what appears to be artillery fire and such, which would have been violence during the original occupation of the Soviet Union. And it's, gotta wait this one out. And it's stuff. The truck, by the way, is definitely Eastern Bloc. And as you can see, there's really no rhyme or reason to any of this. They just threw them up. Now, one of the things that's interesting, by the way, is that areas that are still communist, or communist in name only, like China, for example, still use the central planning structure and still throwing up buildings that simply fall apart into be ruins. Actually, this is one of the biggest problems China has. It built so fast, so far, so long, that what happened is that everything that threw up is almost in ruins now, and the pollution they caused doing so is causing massive problems for the economy. Hang on a second. There we go. So right now, what they're dealing with is a lot of issues. I'm going to have to fight my way through this one. Hang on. I am seriously over level for this section. Oh, you managed to survive that, huh? Okay. Now, as you can see, a lot of these structures are just left out to rot and abandoned because there's no way to dispose of them. Essentially, the cities themselves become the junk piles. But as you can see, there's an older structure back there that still retains its original purpose. Now, the thing about the communist empire of the Soviet Union, or, well, the Soviet Empire, I've gone over briefly what communism is and isn't. One day I'll probably have to go make a larger treatise on it, as it were. But at the moment, let's see, where's the entrance? Maybe I'll just slip in through here. No, no. One of the biggest, what's this? But at the moment, let's just deal with the fact that I'm going to be calling this the Soviet Empire and not the communists, anything or others. Anyways, the Soviet Empire was officially atheistic, and religion was considered to be a mental illness. Better background, anyways. So what happens is that they technically didn't bring on the church because the Eastern Orthodox had enough power that it really didn't want to alienate those many people any further. I mean, there were already... Nobody liked being under the Soviet Union, even people who were working for the Soviet Union. But they left these intact. And the thing was, though, you couldn't be a good party member of the Soviet Union, of the Communist Party, communist in quotations there, and be a churchgoer. You had to choose one or the other. And anybody who wasn't a member of the Communist Party was a second, third, fourth, fifth class citizen in the Union, depending on all their other beliefs. But they did leave the church intact, and it still exists to this day. Eastern Orthodox is interesting because it actually... Oh, hi. It actually is derives off... Hey, dude. It actually derives off the Greek Orthodox Church. Essentially, a long time ago, the Russians stole everything out of the Greek Orthodox, while the majority of what we consider to be Western religion draws from Rome. There's an entire speech and lecture about that, but suffice it to say that this is why it looks a lot differently. More of the Byzantine style of architecture than the Western churches like in Kingsmouth. Anyways, so let's talk to the two individuals still in this church. Now, the question is the holy ground, which could be old school holy consecration, keeping off the vampires? But you have to say no. Pasadine is here. He's a vampire, obviously. If you've seen the episode, you know that, or you played the game. But there's also the fact that invitation cancels out that protection. It's entirely possible that Hasbin asked for sanctuary against the vampire army he was defected from, and the father gave it, which technically means that he's here. And I can't imagine he's happy here. I mean, let's look, he's hunched over. He's never going to admit it, but he's probably, mildly tingling with God's wrath. Remember, though...
Doors are always open to you.
Thank you. Sanctuary. He's an old school. We'll go over that in a second, but let's talk to Father Lucian. Now, Father Lucian and any other person who was sent here ahead of him, all of these people were essentially exiles from the church. They sent them to a vampire-infested area where the peasants all believe in Fae. And as you can see, there ain't much for in a congregation. But that's the thing about faith. It endures, despite all difficulties, even sometimes because of such difficulties. Let's go talk about him.
I have been Hababareshti's priest since last summer. For such a little village, such a modest chapel to a shipwrecked saint, it sheds them like a dog sheds fur. Most choose instead to be sent to monastery.
Yes, it's high casualty, right?
I came because it is good for a man's views to be challenged.
I agree with that.
The people find a place for God in their lives, but he shares that space with stranger things. If they believe both, does it make them half-truths?
That's an interesting question. Okay, so he's talking specifically about the image of Yahweh within the Christian religion. Since you got to remember something, it claims it's the only God, but it grew up as one of many pagan mystery religions through the eras. It just happened to, empirically displace a large number of them, which are now recovering. But it also makes he did exist alongside. Well, the image of him did exist and the church alongside other religions at the same time, and people could pick and choose. Does that make any of the religions invalid because they exist at the same time? And I would say probably not. In fact, the whole monotheistic imperialism is, to me, kind of an indication of a lack of faith. If you honestly believe that your version of the truth can't survive being compared to any others, you don't have a lot of faith in it.
Half-truths. You did not ask for confession, but here is mine. In my home of Russia, there are still elements, bad elements within the
Very
church,
fucking
carried
true.
over from the old state. KGB. And worse.
Yep. The church is very much behind Putin, by the way, if that tells you anything in 2020 about where it is. Yes. The church itself, in order to subvert it, was filled with people who were working for the state to make the church be more or less tell citizens they must obey the state. Yeah, it's kind of a thing that's universal among a lot of monotheistic religions, especially ones that are connected to imperial thinking. But the thing is that anything from, these guys to, say, the conservatives that are aligning themselves with, the evangelicals who align themselves with extreme conservatives. Yeah, the church itself is a political actor. And sometimes I think what happens is that pulls it away from the actual original message that they were trying to give.
They gave me little choice in my assignment.
Mm-hmm.
You will find that there are secrets here, too precious and too dangerous to speak of. I was to keep that silence. The remains of the Soviet operations should not be disturbed.
He's referring, of course, to the Red Hand. We'll get into that. That'll probably be the next episode when we go over that. But yeah, the thing is, even in the real world, there were Soviet experiments and Soviet secrets buried beneath the ground that nobody wants to talk about because of some of the moral and implications and some of their descendants of survivors and such. There is a lot of shit that went down behind the Soviet Union that we will never discover. There's still stuff going on. And they did some really fucking shady things. The game here is just kind of a vague reflection of the actual truth. Let's see what he thinks about the village.
I have to smell the blood and smoke to remind myself this is not some childlike night terror. As adults, we have more practical bad dreams, don't you think?
Oh, hell yes.
Without magic.
One of the things I also want to point out is in the church, people that's corrupt like this, people of real faith will never advance because they won't play politics, and B, nobody really wants reform if they're making money off of it.
Had you only arrived a few months earlier, you would have seen the true magic here, in the fields and the forests. I came to understand that it was not unnatural, no different from the morning dew. It is a part of these people's lives, and why they stay and fight.
Yeah, that's interesting. Basically, he's allowing he has no problem with the pagan magic. He probably sees it as a manifestation of God's will. And if you accept that Gaia is the center of all manifestations in the world, it is. Gaia is the god in this world. What her origin in the divine immaculate machine can be debated indefinitely. After all, they've dipped heavily into Enochian literature and such to create those sort of things. But we'll get to that eventually.
If magic is what the Soviet scientists wanted from this place, I doubt they would have found it in their laboratories, any more than I can demand miracles of God. I put my faith in people.
I'm debatable about that myself, but yeah, you'll never find magic in a laboratory, which is why Oriochi and the Illuminati are doomed. I mean, they can find some ceremonial style magic that can work with their technology, but I think true magic requires the soul.
Of course, you are familiar with this already. Now that great and strange events have seized the world. I saw it on the news. We do have television here in the village. 3 of them, in fact.
Huh.
Or 2, if you prefer not to watch Sophie's romantic comedy movies over and over and over.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's the thing about this. Remember, he confessed to us, which may seem a little weird, but we are technically, in the definition, as a servant of divinity, an angel. So he's kind of, at some level, sensing that subconsciously. I mean, let's face it, we are literally channeling the magic of God here. Let's get a little better background to this one. See if we can shift in and see what he wants to tell us about the Red Hand, the secrets he's supposedly guarding in the back there.
My friend, it seems we were both sent here to safeguard a secret. I hope you had more of a choice in the matter.
Not really.
I do penance for sins that I committed, and sins invented for one I cared about greatly.
Blackmail. He is being blackmailed, probably has family saying, if you don't do this, we will kill your family. Old school.
I think it could be said my mission here has been compromised. With or without me, the forbidden work of Bacchus County will be exposed. My thoughts are with the innocents, not the duty handed to me by my taskmasters.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's honestly, Lucian, fake your death. I'm serious. After all this, fake your death, drop everything else, and go to preach among the people, like, certain carpenter that you might have heard about, who didn't need a church, just the word.
But there is little I can tell you about the Red Hand. The organization died out a long time ago. But many in Europe and beyond are still interested in its accomplishments.
That word's doing a lot of work.
Tools of war. Tools of subjugation.
Again, it's a real-world parallel, as a lot of people are looking at the horrific experimentation done by the Soviet Union, Nazis for that matter, and of course, what the West has its own history of the horrible, horrible weapons and technologies and techniques that were used supposedly to keep the world at peace, by essentially keeping it too frightened to fight.
Crimes more monstrous than any of the real monsters.
You got me there.
That is what I have learned about the world in my time here. There is nothing more ungodly than the acts we make.
Man, it's a lot more nuanced than I thought it would be. Anyway, so let's get to the other half of the equation here. The vampire general Hastieton. Now, what's interesting is that he has come here for sanctuary and he's obeying it. We'll get into that, I think, when we're dealing with his questions, because I know this is going to come up. So why is the vampire general here?
While you and I are allied under Romanian colors, I will do you no harm. You have my soldier's oath. You think it's strange that I betray my own? Let me enlighten you how it is they who are the betrayers. Before I was Wampiri, I was a soldier. And before I was a soldier, I was a man. And that man was Transylvanian.
Alright, I can respect him for that. Yes, okay. Here's something. Kirsten believes that he's confused to the fact that we are currently, thinks we're fighting for the Romanian army. He is not stupid. He has been around for centuries, at the very least. When he's talking about fighting under Romanian colors, he is saying, in the old school language, that we are both fighting for the sovereignty of the land. It doesn't matter whom I'm fighting for and who's my paymaster, which really isn't anyone if you think about it. Maybe the council, if you want to stretch the meta. All he hires about is that the fact that I'm fighting against essentially a civil army attempting to remove the sovereignty of the state of Romania, which takes us both allies, although he's not doing that much besides providing a little information. So, since we're both allies, you don't turn on your allies until after the battle is done, and usually you give each other a grace period. It's kind of rude otherwise.
When I lived, I fought for this land, and in battle I gave my life for it. I have slept for 1,000 years in its good grave earth. I respect it, not like the scum outside and their idiot war.
Man of the people and man of the land here. Yep. He is a defender of what he believes his country should be, and it is not being run by criminal vampires.
They are nothing of my kind. They invade their own homeland, no better than the Mongols, Hungarians, Turks before them.
A lot of blood in history.
Such disgrace. And to what purpose? They have been promised a Wampiri nation under their own rule. How does such a nation sustain itself without humans?
Yeah, there's some short-sighted thinking. Yeah, there's an interesting parallel here. In current times and past, and no doubt the future, a lot of people who are disaffected, violent, limited in intellect, a lot of them are promised that violence will bring... If you perform violence for another person, you'll be rewarded for it, when in fact they're simply being used as the disposable pawns of the imperialistic ambitions of the individuals that have made those promises in this case. I guarantee you that even if they were successful, those the violent rank that survive, they won't be rewarded anyway, except being forced to provide additional services. But they're all caught up in trying to satisfy the more conventional bloodlust, the desire to express oneself through violence, which always ends up in self-destruction. After all, violent delights lead to violent ends, according to Shakespeare.
Misguided fools. We need each other, your race and mine.
Debatable on that one. If vampires... Alright, predators and prey. Do vampires act as a predator and remove the weak from the species? I don't think that's the case, but I could be wrong. There's going to be a bonus episode. We reached 200 just recently, which involves other things as well I'll talk about. But in that, it will be going over the idea of whether or not the supernatural creatures that predate on humanity are doing the same thing as predators in the natural world do to the herd. Does the human race better off with the fools that are taken down by these supernatural creatures taken away. And I'm sometimes iffy on that one. I mean, the thing is, vampires exist as, well, get into their background when we get further into the storyline of with the interludes, but they are a synthetic species. They were created. Do they have a place in the natural order, or are they an abomination to be removed? We'll go over that later.
Ironic that the tribes of the night would choose this place to wage war on humankind. Ironic or intentional? We are so fond of grand theatrics after all. You see, the great Dracula and his Order of the Dragon once sought to extinguish us here.
This is them trying to piss on the memory.
The scars still remain on the trees in the old forest, the rocks of the mountains. So furious was the battle, and so long-lived the truce that followed.
Most wars don't end in one side killing the other. They end with some form of agreement for the other two to survive. The question is, whoever holds, of course, the greatest victories in the war is the one who gets to make the other make more concessions.
Wartime takes its toll on both the victor and the vanquished. Away from the cities, the people were not ready to renounce their superstition. And we, the superstitions, were not ready to be abandoned. An agreement was made.
And what was this gentle being's agreement?
An agreement was honored. But now it is broken, and the eyes of the world will judge this valley. It is the end of refuge, the end of the trust between races. It may be the end of us, and if so, I accept it. Better to die than to live with dishonor.
I like this old guy. He's old school. I probably may one day have to set him on fire and scatter the ashes, but I like him. Anyways, yeah, he's talking about the old school concept of agreements between powers. Now, here's the thing. Why do we have manners, customs, and laws? See, originally they came from the Bronze Age, and it wasn't because we were a species that was enlightened, enlightened and, ready to make these sort of understand that we were to live together in peace. We did it because we're bloody fucking bastards, and if we don't stop ourselves, we will wipe each other out to the last individual, burn the crops, take down the village, and extinguish our species. We require something to keep us from doing that. I mean, the handshake originally comes around because it was part of a ritual greeting that made sure you didn't have a knife in your sleeve. You literally, that's why the old school ones extended, handshakes extended up to the elbow to make sure there wasn't a sheath down there. That's where we get it from. For underneath all of the desires for us to see us as a peaceful people are the rules that chain our animal self from tearing everything apart.
Wampiri, it is not a race, it is a disease.
I like it.
But for a time it was a rarefied disease, cultivated, such as the breeding of a fine Transylvanian orchid.
Yeah, you don't want to have an idiot stuck with you for eternity.
We were nobility, coaches and mountain estates, fangs and opera capes, yes, if you will. Stoker knew.
Oh, Hammer.
Although why he chose Dracula for his fanciful mythologizing. Well, that wronged knight's people turned on his name like wolves.
What does he mean by that?
It is the way of your humankind, and we, Wampiri, who believed ourselves elevated from humans, have proved ourselves so wrong.
Oh, yeah.
An eternity of luxury was no longer enough for us. The bloodline grows thinner, and more violent and reckless. The children turn on our name. As brutish and stupid as young men. As vain and temperamental as young girls.
Ooh.
They draw attention upon us all, reignite old rivalries. The elders become insane with paranoia that they will be cannibalized in their sleep.
A little bit of world darkness here, but yeah. Problem is, as I was explaining about the knowledge that our customs, myths, laws, and regulations keep us from destroying each other, is that when enough generations go by and we forget that, when we forget why we do not love war in truth for the destruction it creates, when those children will only hear the stories of honor and glory and this lone heroes saving empires, they decide that they want to try it in the real world, and the cycle begins again.
What I speak of now was happening centuries ago. Since then, look outside. Behold the glory of the Wampiri.
He's terribly self-aware. By the way, one of the things I wanted to go over in here is the concept of sacred hospitality. When Hasidian came in, and he agreed to bring him in under the old rules, that was sacred hospitality. What it meant is that if a host gives guest rights to the guest must respect the host's rules. In other words, you can't, the most ancient being is that even if you are the worst of enemies, you cannot touch each other. Even if you're the worst of enemies and you are under guest right protection, you are expected to provide protection to that zone. And if a problem occurs, then it has to be revoked. You are expected to remove yourself from that sanctuary before any wrongdoing. And to do so was to insult the gods. And I don't know if Hasidan believes in a god, but he certainly believes in honor. So let's go over some... Alright. Hang on one second. I gotta take a break. Be right back. Okay, sorry about that, but talking for half an hour or so straight can be a little stressful in the throat. Had to give it a little lubrication. I wanted to point out, by the way, side here, is that the church itself is built on the Anima Well, and it's normally the practice of any imperialism to build your holy sites on top of the previous ones is kind of a, well, pissing on their grave, I guess, would be the way to put it. But odds are this was a pagan circle or temple, due to the fact that the Anima Well is here and allow them to access Gaia's energy, as Ricky Pagan does in Tokyo, and we'll get to him eventually. But that is the, that there's a dual purpose here, because by placing, oh yeah, here we go. Gonna have to stealth through here, I hope. By placing the church here and the graveyard, they also create a zone where people are kind of hesitant to, yeah, the ghouls are, of course, digging up the food, which is what they usually do. They're scavengers, not warriors. They're just being pressed into being used as irregulars, as it were. Oh, there we go. Sorry, for some reason getting lag. So what they did also do is create a zone where people don't like to go, because humans don't like to think about death. It's really that simple. And having a warden, like the Father Lucian here, to further prevent people from getting back into these crannies and finding...
Additional assignment received.
Somebody cleaned out the area. And finding the actual secret, one of the smaller red hand bunkers. As you can see, it's been converted into a ghoul nest, sorry, that's what they call it. Apparently it was just cleaned out. It'll respawn eventually, where the ghouls have created a sort of cannibalistic tribal situation here. Now, what's interesting, of course, the center of it is a Hind helicopter, old-style Hind-D, I think, from the Soviet Union, which was the workhorse, and the civilian versions of two, whether it be military or civilian versions, of the Soviets, and still is to some degree. I think they're still like the AK, they're still using this design, although upgraded with modern technology. But this is all just window dressing, and for here, the bunker in which the ghouls... excuse me. Do you require any assistance here? There you go. Have fun. They're finished. I can tell from the motions they're finishing one of the quests we already did previously. But yeah, this bunker, which we can't access any further, as it's sealed up and this is inaccessible, probably rusted shut, as the door is, and down there as well, is... I love how the ghouls have made the televisions into a shrine. It's very human of them. After all, what do humans do besides worship a television by giving it a sacred spot and staring at it constantly in meditation with the sacred messages that it produces? But that's enough about that. Yeah, this is the Red Hand structures. Now, this structure would adhere in the 1970s. I honestly keep talking about that, and it is reinforced in the lore, because the 1970s was the heyday of the Soviet weird experimentation process. You know, if you are in any way connected to conspiracy theorists and the old school type before it all became about, you know, the Jewish protocols and such recently, you'll know that this 1970s was an era when they were experimenting with everything, including occult principles such as psychic abilities and summoning shit and really weird things that go on and on. But this section right here is the first of many structures you'll find. It's one of the least interactive. And what... oh, I wanted to point something out. Some of you old kids probably don't even know what the hell that is back there. We used it during the mission, but you still may not know what it means. This is a magnetic tape reader. Before there were, you know, flash memory, before there was floppy disks, before there was really anything of data storage, they used magnetic tape. The same thing they used to use for old cassette tracks. Now, of course, it took hundreds upon hundreds of feet of this stuff in those there just to get what you could get off of a 8 gigabyte stick at this point. I mean, frankly, the miracles of data compression or storage are, you know, they exist. It's huge. Somebody who had to work with things that were the computers that had processors whose power is measured in the kilo will tell you that. But the thing is that that was at the time. Before that, there were punch cards, where literally you put the ones and zeros as little holes inside the card and then fed that into the machine. And if you got one slightly wrong, you screwed everything up. And magnetism, oh god, that tape could break like crazy and it fell apart. It was a miracle when they finally got the floppy disk going and then the hard disk, and then we kept going forward to the point where now we kind of have peaked with what we can do with processor speed. Anyways, let's continue. Alright, we're going to go out this way. I'm just passing through. Thank goodness for the timing on this one. Oh, dead ghoul. Oh, it's ghoul. That's how I like to see it. Let's talk about what happened when the Soviets rolled in. That is pretty much what we're dealing with here. The thing about war is that usually life doesn't actually occur in cities naturally. It occurs in these small villages. And every war, it's a Bronze Age to the current day, whenever an imperialistic force wants to roll in, they erase what was there before. In this case, it's the vampires, but it might as well be the Soviets. It might as well be, you know, well, the Western forces in Afghanistan. It might as well be the Romans piling through Gaul. What they do is they take these villages, the places where essentially people's lives revolved around the fields and the forests and such, and they lived for generations in some peace, destroy it, and basically compel them to live in a new way. That's what imperialism is. And this is what's left. This is literally how hundreds, if not thousands of years people history simply burned up in a day or two by the instruments of war so that people in the cities can get their cheap supplies. Because after all, they're not here for the people. They're here for the natural resources. They're here for the labor pool. They're here for what they can make out of it. And speaking of Soviets, yeah. What happened to the delivery boy, do you think? He was caught by a stray round? It's probably already, decayed at this point. But yeah, down here, what we're dealing with here is these encampments using old Soviet material. You can see the old Soviet-style truck back there, the metal they've scavenged from the buildings. You see, a lot of times you're not going to have access to fresh supplies, so you dismantle the villages and everything in it, and you start creating something. I don't know where they have that many tarps, though. Seriously, do you guys just like haul them around? And they create their temporary encampments here, because one thing about an army is that it needs a lot of fences. You can see them actually dismantling the old structures there. Maybe putting a new one up. Not quite sure, but you can see how rusted it is. Now, let's see if we can get the board working again. God, I want to get endless fights. As you can see inside, they create their computer banks, old 1970s style communications, with an old laptop which has more processing power than everything else put together. Their food supply, all of this is essentially a logistic exercise in culling everything they can from the village, from the blood of the citizens to the structures they lived in, into what they can use it to attack and devour the next village. Habarensti. I can't pronounce it, I'm sorry. So essentially, war is like a virus in that way. Essentially self-replicating, destroying the host, and continuing on to find new hosts, because war is not economically sustainable. It requires new resources to be consumed constantly. And here we are at the neck of the Red Hand structure that's probably the central headquarters. Now, it was built as an observatory by the Soviets as a cover for everything else. And frankly, everything from the number station, which I broadcast the paranormal radio theater transmissions from, to the dungeon up there, which is a dimensional experimentation thing. We'll get to that eventually. I've kind of put the dungeons over onto the bonus episodes because they're not actually dealing with the main narrative, and it can be difficult to create them. And of course the other experimental chambers up there that the Red Hand was using to try to create their own Ubermensch, supernatural soldiers. But let's go talk to an interloper. Notice, however, they're maybe harnessing animals themselves. Let's go talk to somebody who's recently been in on the scene. The nameless vampire hunter, who I've mocked before as a bad Blade impersonator. But remember, he's the one who called us out for our shenanigans. Alright, tell me about yourself.
This is pretty much Nirvana for a vamp hunter like me. Plenty of game. Most of it on the easy side. but there are exceptions. The grunts, they're like dogs. They bark, they bite, they hunt in packs, but they're dumb. They just do what they're told.
I actually want to hear more about this. I like the tactical analysis.
The ones you need to watch out for are the ones in uniform. And the ones you really need to watch out for are the ones in white.
Not the council.
They're clever bastards. And they know what you're thinking as soon as you look at them.
Telepaths?
They can read you like an open book.
Ah, predators.
Which is why I stay far away. Unlike you, I'm well aware of my limitations.
That's a fair analysis. I have gotten it over my head. But yeah, he knows that he can only take down the grunts. The grunts are easy. They make the same stupid mistakes over and over again that he's seen again and again and again, and he just takes advantage of them. Rinse and repeat. We, on the other hand, because we think we're overcharged with the power of Gaia, do tend to get sometimes in and over our heads. It's only our immortality that kind of keeps us going.
There's no real trick to hunting vampires. You don't have to hit them in the heart with a wooden stake or cut their heads off.
Good.
They don't have to be buried in sanctified soil. You just have to hurt them real bad. Eventually they stop moving.
That's true. You do enough trauma, anybody's going to stop. But the other thing is that Habaransti... Oh, not the village. Sorry, I just did his name, and I've forgotten the name of the vampire lord back in the church. He stated that only the elders can come back from death. The older ones, they're just tougher in some ways, but they also have certain weaknesses. One of the reasons they're all covered, by the way, is trying to stay away from sunlight, but that would also fail the moment you shot them, because, of course, sunlight would get in the hole. What it is that they're using Bram Stoker's rules, which are vampires are weaker in light, which is one of the things Francis Ford Coppola got right in his film that I love him for. So it's just an annoyance. Probably they, gets kind of blinded because their eyesight won't adjust in daylight. Probably the skin kind of mildly irritates and slows them down, so they cover themselves in whatever rags they can find.
They invented the myths themselves. Made them sound harder to kill than they really are.
Makes sense.
Except the one about sunlight. That one's true. Stupid motherfuckers didn't realize all they'd have to do was dress better.
That's what we're speaking of. These basic hazmat suits that made out of rags.
What we have here is a war on two fronts. Most of the vamps out there are part of the crusade. They've come from across Eastern Europe, called in by the
Lilith, through Mara.
Her crusade.
Mara, remember, is a puppet queen. When we fought her back in that episode, she just had a bunch of power but no plan, and she was a slave to her appetite. The only thing she existed for was to be there so Lilith didn't have to, and I'm pretty sure Lilith called in the orders through her, and she just likes to look pretty in white. What is Lilith's obsession with white?
They're weak of mind and body, starved for blood. Nothing but mongrels. One-on-one, not much of a fight. But there are older vamps here, and things that have been buried.
Like the super vamps. We haven't gotten to them yet.
I've been inside the mountain, but only for a look.
Talking about the structure here.
Goes too deep for me, too hardcore. I can fight those crusader vamps, the Mongols, and that's as far as it goes.
It's true. He has his limitations.
The older ones, the experiments,
Right.
the Soviets, those who carry the sign of the Red Hand, I'll leave them to you.
Happy to do it.
It's your world that made them, not mine.
He doesn't like me, but we are on the same side and we do respect each other. Yes, the thing is that he can't tell the difference between the magic Gaia or the power of the Red Hand, Lilith, so he dislikes both of us. The thing is he also doesn't like about the fact is that, well, factions don't actually protect the common people. They protect their own assets. They are devolved empires of their own who have forgotten their original purpose. And as we've gone over the section in Transylvania, that's one of the things that Hipster Dude is struggling with. And just showing off. I love the board. Or boards, I have two of them. It's a snowboard as well. Anyways, excuse me. Let's talk about the structure here. Now, the thing is, you notice that they're taking stuff out because they're doing the old supplies that have been buried long with the Soviet Union abandonment of the thing, because the Soviets had supplies everywhere. Because, like I said, the central planning, not only were they forced to make more supplies, and usually crappy ones, although do not fucking underestimate Soviet tanks, I'll tell you that much. They also... do I have to? Oh, for God's sakes. Hang on, guys. I'll be as quick as I can. I'm gonna try, but apparently... Ah, there we go. Conscripts. How typical. Excuse me, guys, coming through, but you're not gonna respect that. Got your heart. Everything burns. You just have to heat it up enough. Yeah, there we go. So, they've been unloading this Red Hand's central compound for the area for everything they can find, including, you know, preserved tanks and such. And here's one of the super vampires. Essentially, Soviets, Red Hands, experimented with Lilith's experiments on the vampires and tried to improve them. Then, when Lilith came back to reclaim the army, she essentially added them to hers. Because if you remember back when we confronted her, she's got this habit of genetically encoding obedience. It doesn't work so well with us because we have the Gaian connection to block it, but she can make us freak out by speaking her names. Which, frankly, is really, as far as I'm concerned, egotistic as hell. My name shall terrify you. You don't want your name to terrify people, you want your reputation to do that. And you keep burying yours. Anyways, the Central Observatory section, part of a quest, and, of course, you're using the radio telescope. Which, if you don't know what a radio telescope is, it's a structure that's designed to, excuse me. Come on. Ugh. Do I have to kill these guys? Yes, I do have to kill these guys for... Oh, the keyboard's not acting up. Anyway, excuse me, guys. Hopefully I don't trigger you. And radio telescopes are designed to receive radio transmissions from the stars and translate them in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, also, however, I'm betting that one's also a satellite uplink. They're designed to help the Soviet Red Hand system keep in track with the Central Command using encrypted communications that don't require line-to-line transmission. And, of course, that laptop has more power than virtually everything else, and, you know, just gonna grab this. There's a long story behind that one, but I actually accidentally failed that quest, and I'm gonna have to finish it if I want to do things out. But as you can see, they're in the process of dismantling everything they can so they can use it for war supplies. Eventually, if they were left alone, they'd completely destroy everything, empty out all the bottoms, conscript all the frozen specimens, and then move on, leaving just another ruin. Ruin of their own ruin, which is really ironic if you think about it. But yeah, this so far is the Red Hand. Now we're going to go to other structures as well, and I think I probably talked your ear off enough because I think I'm reading the 45-minute mark, which is where I stopped. But yeah, I will be going over the rest of the Red Hand's experimentations, Lilith history with them, and of course how they fit into the Vampire Crusades in future ones. In the next section, I'm going to be dealing with some of the more hardcore structures. Probably next section, I'll be dealing with the supernatural elements, the natural ones that existed here before the Empire rolled in, before the vampires did, before probably Mara did. The ancient pagan ones. So, until then, ooh, nice close-up here. This is Fantastic World saying farewell from Lovecraft Country and Secret World Interludes. If you like this, like, share, subscribe. Oh my god, you're gonna do this to me? Alright, hopefully this will be fine, guys. Sorry, lost my track there. Anyways, if you'd like, share, subscribe, and of course, if you really like it, down below are links to the Gumroad Pavement platform. You can help expand the channel a bit, add new episodes per week, new series such as the Secret World Lore Hunter series, which if we next unlock thing, which we get to it, $3 away, we will be able to, I'll start the system where I look hunting down all the lore bits that we have hovering around here with other characters so we can get the full story of the backstory of the Secret World. And, of course, if we have subscription unlocks. We just passed the last one at 200, which means that Lust from Beyond will be the next series, which you apparently are all looking forward to, when it comes out September 27th. Now, because Decker may end a couple episodes earlier, I'm probably going to do a Let's Try or some other specials between them, but I will when it drops, I will play it as requested. Now, 250, I got a couple ideas. If you want to make any suggestions down below what you might want to see, let me know. But in the meantime, I'm probably going to check out a couple of possibilities and see what we can come to. Alright, so until then, see you next time.
You will see the dawning of a new age. To be a monarch or a beggar. To lose everything or to become a god. To stand with us or against us. The choice